Welcome to Radio Northumberland, and this is a one-off show, special as part of the Made in Northumberland series. And today we're looking at what it takes to be an author, and once you have wrote a book, what is the best way to get it out there? And in most cases that's going to be self-publishing. Now to help me explore that, I've got a guest who I had in must be more than a year ago now. He's Iain Parke, and he wrote some books which are basically exploring a fictional, he tells me, backpatch club from
Definitely fictional.
Definitely fictional, he says. Welcome to the show, Iain.
Hi there.
As I said, I read your first book and I've read every book since then. Fascinating topic, and I'd love to know how you're researching, but never mind. Now,
carefully, I think is the answer.
yeah. If by chance anybody who's a member of a club with red and white colours, I have tried to get in touch with you to do a show like this, but I've had no success so far. If you are interested, Paul at RadioNorthumberland.com, I'd love to have a chat. Now, let's say the show is about becoming an author. I got a book out there. I went down the traditional path, even though I wasn't really involved in my business part of then. Did the process. You've done your whole thing from beginning to end. But I mean, when did you first realise you wanted to be a writer?
Very early on. I've always, it's the classic answer of I've always wanted to be a writer.
So you sent me crayons.
Yes, I started early. You know, we've all done it. Stories behind the bike shed. So I thought I could control it, but you know, eventually it catches up with you. No, I've always wanted to be a writer. It was one of the things I wanted to be when I was at school, and then you get sensible, go out and get a proper job. But you know, it's just nagging away at the back of your mind, and eventually it comes out, and you just get on and do it.
When did you actually write your first book? Whether it was published or not?
Oh, the first book.
Did it a magazine or something like a school magazine?
Well, I've gone down both routes. So I have, in my other life, published some work-related books through traditional publishing means. But my first fiction book, I kicked off writing it in about 1993. When I was working overseas, as effectively therapy about working overseas. Got about halfway through it, I suppose, came back home and put it away, and about 10 years later, no, about 8 or 9 years later, picked it back up again and thought, well, I really ought to finish this. So it took, and then having written it, it turned out to be about 180,000 words long. And just to put that in context, a normal paperback is somewhere between 80 and 100,000. So having then rewritten it about 2 or 3 times and then chopped it in half, I eventually sort of thought, right, I've got to get this published and get on to something else. Otherwise, I'm simply going to be rewriting the same book for years and years and years and the rest of my life. And then I moved on to write the second book, which, having gone through the whole process of doing the first one so intensively and lots of revisions and rewriting, the second one, which is effectively the first biker book, was a very quick one-take thing. And all my books since have been very quick one-take things. They seem to come out, they obviously get edited and proofread and copyright edited, etc. But they are essentially written once and not rewritten and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten.
That's a classic thing to say. There must be thousands of bestsellers in drawers. One finished it.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, one of your questions about sort of just getting published. Well, yes, finish it and publish it. it's one of the key bits of advice.
Because you mentioned, well, there's 2 points really. You mentioned writing and rewriting and editing, because many people, I think, who write a book or want to write a book think, I'm going to write down, sit down, I'm going to write it, and that's it. Don't be afraid of rewriting and editing.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm very fortunate because my wife at one point worked as a proofreader and copy editor, so she's very good at sort of taking what I write and putting it into proper English with commas and all those sorts of good things. And she's very good at challenging and saying, I read this paragraph and it doesn't make sense, I don't understand it, go away and write it so it does. And when I wrote my first book, I sent it to, you send it to family to have a look, see it. And at the time, my youngest brother was working as a sub-editor on a weekly newspaper down south. And so I sent him the first three chapters, and he sent them back to me in an envelope. and he'd taken a red pen and he'd put a red pen through half of the opening chapter, and just against the first page of this red pen he'd just written "Please." Oh yeah, that's the sort of feedback you want. You don't want people saying, "Oh yes, that's wonderful." You actually want the people who will say, "That does what you need." You do need the critical feedback. Yeah. And you need to be able to accept it when somebody writes.
I mean, a book out of my book, or I say my book, was co-written by Stephen Lambert, a friend of mine. But actually what happened was, Stephen decided to write this book, wrote some chapters, which cut me out. Mm-hmm. Then I sent it, as you did, blindly, or double blindly. Some people saying, "What do you think of this?" Uh-huh. Friends and family. Didn't tell who it was. Got the feedback. Thought, okay, we've got to start rewriting. So as you say, if you're going to send it to somebody, you're going to get feedback, make sure it's somebody who's going to be honest.
Yes.
Otherwise, because if you send the publisher, you'll get an honest reply.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, if you're lucky, yeah.
You'll get it back. I mean, so you said it was a very quick process. What, in terms of writing a book, how long is a quick process?
I've now actually got almost a routine, if you like. I will start writing. I mean, I'm currently scribbling, and I was scribbling yesterday, ideas for my next book. Right. But I'll probably start writing it sometime in the middle of January. By about April, I've probably got 20,000 words, so more or less a quarter of it, but it's very much odd bits and pieces and a skeleton and scenes here and there. And then over the period through May to probably about September is the bulk of then writing it and finishing it and getting it to a completed manuscript, which I've usually got done by the end of September, beginning of October. And then a month or so of the copy editing, proofreading process, if you like, with a view to publishing in November. Then you're into a marketing blitz. And then the whole thing starts again, in January.
That sort of brings up several questions in my head when you describe the process. It's a process I've asked virtually every author I've had on my other show, Desert Island Disc, and it varies. I'm most fascinated to find out how people work. Are you disciplined? I was listening to an old show by the guy who writes as Ed McBain. Mm-hmm. And he's in his 80s now. Was called in the psychiatrist's chair. But he sits down every day between X and Y, and that's his writing period.
Yeah.
Religiously. I can't do that. I've got to be in the mood. How do you write?
Well, I have a day job, right. So that takes up a certain amount of time. Essentially, I write when I'm in my writing phase. I will write every weekend. I will usually spend most of Saturday and most of Sunday writing, and I tend to go away for a week's holiday with my wife around May time, and there's quite a big chunk of that is the real kick-off for really getting the bulk of the work done. And then we also tend to go away in September, so that tends to end up being quite a bit of time just getting the last bits finished, if you like. So, but no, I am reasonably disciplined about doing it. It's I see it as my hobby, if you like. Some people will go out on a Sunday and play golf. Well, I go out and sit in front of my computer and type away at my next book.
So, one of the questions I have, and I'm not sure if it relates to what you just said, is what do you think is the most important attribute you need to succeed as a writer? Is there one, or is it the case of you must be multidisciplined in terms of being able to do X, being able to do Y, being able to take feedback and not get paranoid or personal about it, be disciplined?
The starting point is you've got to write.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who would like to write. There's a lot of people who would like to produce a novel, but you actually have to sit down and do it. And one of the questions you quite often get is, how do you do it? How do you get the time? Well, actually, it's you write. I spend my Sunday writing, and I spend my next Sunday writing, and I know how many words effectively I would expect to produce, a weekend, and that builds up to being a book. So first and foremost, you have to write. Then you need feedback, and you need to be able to develop your writing skills, so you're writing something that is, being blunt about it, worth people reading.
Yeah.
And there's no way of really knowing that until you actually do it, put it out there, get people's feedback, and go through that process. And as you do it, hopefully you become a better and better writer. I hope, he says. as I start on my 7th novel, I hope they're getting better.
That sort of. I mean, I write a column, monthly column. I write £2 or £4 on a magazine in America, and just like you now, I've been doing it 18 months. You develop a routine, and part of my routine is to break it down into rough blocks, 4 blocks. It's the same, I think, if somebody is sitting now listening, I've got an idea for a book, I think it'll be good. But the physical thought of sitting down in front of a keyboard to write a book, it's quite daunting.
Yeah.
Is it better to sit down to have sort of, as you said, blocks that you maybe know where the start is and middle is, where you want to go, and take it from there?
I think it's difficult for me to talk about what's the best way of doing it, because all I can talk about really is how I do it and what works for me. I tend to have a central idea about what a book is going to be about, and that can be really quite a limited. Sometimes it's just a single image or a conversation, and it's where's that going to go. And then this is actually what I was doing yesterday. Over a period, you start to think, well, okay, that could go there and it could go there, and you sketch out little lines and scenes and things that might happen.
Do you do that in your head or physically on the screen?
I tend to do it in my head or just and then scribble it down in notes. Before I came here this morning, I was transcribing 3 pages of notes that I sat down with a coffee in a cafe in between meetings yesterday and just scribbled down. And that starts to give you more of a structure on which to hang things, and then I will develop little scenes and little conversations that are part of that. So you start to build a very vague skeleton, and then you start to put a bit of flesh on bits of the bones, and eventually I get to the point where I've got sections that are sort of written and an idea of how you get from one to the other, and then build the bridges, if you like. And what usually happens is I get about 3/4 of the way through it, and I think I know what the beginning, middle and end is. And by the time I get to starting to build these bridges, I actually realise there is then, beyond the end, there is then something else going on that has come out of what I'm doing that puts a new light on it, or somebody says something in part of the conversations that suddenly makes you realise they've got a different job.
Said that you.
Well, I don't. I mean, they take a life of their own, I mean, the second, I think we've talked about this before, the second biker book that I did, sort of heavy-duty attitude, the first one, Heavy Duty People, was supposed to be a standalone. It was just a one-off. And the second one came about simply because 2 of the characters got together in my head one day, had a meeting in a cafe and a conversation. I thought, where the hell, where did that come from? And what happens afterwards, and they were off, it's nothing to do with me. I'm just along for the ride and just taking notes.
So this leads me on to another question, because you wrote fiction. I won't say with the way you described it as something you made up. I did non-fiction, and I find that I can't write fiction. How do you get the ideas? Because obviously if you write several books, as I say, it's a story. So how do you get the ideas, and how does, you mentioned conversations, or people say something, or something happens. If you're going to sit down as a new author, this is what the show is about, do you, as it's often said, should you write about what you know? No. Can you write something fresh and do research?
There's this big thing about you ought to write things about what you know. I would qualify that. I would say write about something that you're interested and passionate about. You can find the knowledge, but what you're really bringing to the party is your interpretation, your view, what you're putting into it as a viewpoint and a story, and if it's about something that really interests you and you're passionate about, that will come through in your writing, I think. If you simply write about what you know, many people may know it. If you're not going to be interested and passionate about it, then why should a reader?
Sure. Which sort of brings on to another.
And you'll get bored and you won't finish it, is the other thing.
Yeah. I mean, the way as you were talking, I was thinking of some of the books, pamphlets and magazines out there which are on very, very specialised subjects. So if you want to be an author, and for your first book, should you maybe... the question I've really got is, as you sit down in front of your PC screen, or you want to do it longhand, whichever, should you write what you want to write, or should you have in the back of your mind, is this commercial?
My experience was it wasn't a question of whether what I wanted to write, it's what I had to write. I had a story that I wanted to tell when I wrote my first fiction book. And as I say, I joke about it being sort of therapy, but in many ways it was. And just because I want to write something as therapy is no reason at all why somebody else might want to read it. Once I'd started going down the route, then it was a question of, well, if I want to do this and want it to be commercial, I actually have to produce something that somebody else is going to want to read. And I thought within what I was trying to write about, there would be things that would be of interest. And I think it depends on why you want to be a writer. There will be people who want to write something because it is purely for their personal interest, and if they're passionate about it and they want to write it, well, that's fine. Just don't expect the world to rush out and buy it. If you want to write something because you want to entertain people and interest them or educate them, etc., then you've got to write something that is going to do those things in a way that is going to be attractive to them, because to skip towards the back of the conversation we're going to have, there's two bits: there's the writing, and then there's the publishing and actually getting it out there. And yeah, exactly. And you can't market and sell a product that's no good.
You
can try, but you're facing a bit of an uphill battle. At the same time, if you simply write a better mousetrap, that's no reason that people are actually going to beat a path to your door. So if you want to do self-publishing, you have to appreciate that there are the two sides of the coin. There is the writing and there is the publishing business side of it. And that has an implication on what you need to be writing, unless you're going to just simply write for your own pleasure and not be particularly concerned about whether anybody buys it or not.
Well, you could actually write on a topic. It could be an obscure topic, could be a topic that wants to read.
Yeah.
You can self-publish, you can spend your money, and you can say, I wrote a book, but not necessarily going to get read.
Yeah. And there are rationales for doing that. As I say, I wrote and was traditionally published some business-related books. Right. Those were written, and my publisher was very good. They took me out for lunch before the first one came out, and they sat me down and they said, you do realise that a good business book in the small business space probably sells about £750 a year. And being reasonable at maths, I could multiply that by the 37.5p or whatever it was I was going to earn per copy, and realise what they were actually telling me was don't give up the day job. But the reason for writing those particular business books was because I was interested in a subject. I had something I wanted to communicate into a business community that I thought would be helpful, and it would help me build my career. So there were a whole load of other reasons apart from the numbers of sales that I got and how many 37.5p's would then drop through my letterbox. Yeah, exactly. And that's a very rational and completely valid reason for wanting to do something.
Career progression. I mean, many people. My other show, Beyond Normal, the Paranormal Show, many people who made it into TV, and it's not going to happen in the UK at the moment, did it because they were columnists, so they picked a book up, picked a column up, read it, and it's interesting. But that sort of leads me on, because before we came on air, we were talking about the biker books you mentioned, not the business ones, or be optioned for TV. And you were talking about the process and how we both found that the process of going from the finished product to actually getting on the screen is torturous. If it sort of leads me on to a fun question before we go into the music break, I'm going to talk about getting the book out there, because really what we've said now is, if you want to write a book, do it. There's no short thing. But what was the most, in any part of the process, from writing the books, creating the books, getting them published, marketing them, what was the most surprising thing you found about it?
Well, other than people buying them, you mean? The most surprising thing, it's the interaction with readers, and that's one of the most rewarding things. It's when you get emails or people tweeting you or sending you a Facebook comment about the books, particularly when they particularly when they're complimentary, obviously, but particularly when they say things like, "Oh, they feel very realistic," or you've obviously done your research, and it stacks up. That for me is a real buzz, because when I started out writing, particularly with this biker series books, what I wanted to do was write something that was credible and respectful and, inverted commas, realistic, and to get people coming back from within the life saying, yes, they are perceived as being realistic and credible. Yeah, that's just great. That tells me I've done the job right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the biker scene, God, I'm just thinking, how long? 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. And I've never been a Backpatch Club member, but I've been around them, I've interacted with them. And I've read books, or I've started to read books like yours and go, this is rubbish. This is drawn from newspaper cuts or half-truths. Yours comes across, as you said, as being realistic. I'm going to go to music break in the moment, but as always, I go off a tangent. Because there's a question I asked my previous author, because it happened to me. It's happened actually at my daughter's wedding, so almost a year ago. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been recognised? Ever been sort of fan come up to you and wanting to get your autograph?
No, not yet.
I was going to say half drunk, but that's not quite true. I was drunk. I didn't handle it very well, was it? What do you mean?
No, I'm not George R.R. Martin, who can't walk down the street in Edinburgh apparently these days without being mobbed by fans. But no.
I think that's my ambition to get packed. I'll keep wearing my dark glasses indoors. It'll happen eventually.
Is that why you wear them?
Yeah.